Welcome, Dr. Azizan Baharuddin. You're a professor in the Department of Science and Technology Studies at the University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur, and you're also the director for Center of Civilisational Dialogue. Um, Dr. Azizan Baharuddin has special interest in environmental ethics, the interactions and relationships between religion and science, and the impact of science and society. So, welcome, Dr. Azizan. It's a
Thank you
pleasure
so
to have you
much.
here.
Thank you so much, Hamza.
You know, the way I first got introduced to you actually was in my master's. I was reading a book called Islam and Ecology: A Bestowed Trust, and you had
Okay,
an
right.
essay in there, and that was
Yes.
quite interesting because I didn't know about what Malaysia was doing in the field of sustainable development and ecology.
Sure.
Um, could you talk us through how you came to develop an interest in environmental ethics of Islam?
Okay, I think just a little bit of tiny introduction vis-a-vis my background, where I grew up, how I grew up. Uh, Interestingly enough, I was born in a community just outside of Kuala Lumpur, which is at that time not developed. Lots of orchards. There was some forest left and beautiful pristine rivers and all of that. And growing up, we played with rubber uh, seeds. We played with dragonflies. We knew of grasshoppers, edible ones, being used as protein sources by the people in the community. So all this, I think, in a sense, gave me a kind of feeling of being close to nature, right? And the fact that later on, when I pursued a degree in biology in Tasmania, of course, in biology, even at high school, you learn this. Our relationship with just the green leaves, for example, the oxygen that we breathe in, it comes out from small pores called stomata in the leaves, and our carbon dioxide goes into the leaves, and so on and so forth. And you realize that science actually explains to you how things happen, right? But it doesn't tell you the why or the origin of phenomena in nature, right? And then as a Muslim, you grow up having the respect of the Quran, of course, and you learn to comply with the Sharia, do's and don'ts in life. Uh, but here, what I'm trying to say is, how did I come close to environmental ethics? It's my encounter with the importance of relating science and religion together.
Mm.
Right? So when you are always watching out for things that are happening in nature, means you're interested in nature very much, like I was. Like I can take a rose, flower, and just admire the petals and think of the amazingness of the of the patterns, that surrounds the rose flower and all of that, and just not spoke about the leaf. And then when you look at your body, how your body functions, actually a lot of your organs are on autopilot. Who's the pilot? So then when you read the Quran, more than 1,000 ayats, if you like, are actually directly talking about phenomena in nature, things that are in nature, including the fact that every living thing contains water and all that. So there you are. You very quickly, through understanding that science and religion, Quran and nature, two inseparable entities, leads you to a natural conclusion that when you speak about nature, how it is being damaged, this, 30 years on from these earlier experiences, now we know we are at COP27, right? And we hear of bombastic statements by the scientists and all that, that we don't have much time left. So is there a way to, can you get away from talking about environmental ethics? Why ethics in particular? Because I was doing philosophy of science. In philosophy, we know that ethics or axiology is one of the very important branches of philosophy, right? So people always, when talk about ethics, is man to man. hablum minan nas. But here, people hardly speak about, Muslims hardly, it seems to me, Muslims are not talking enough about hablum minan bi'ah, the environments, yeah. And they speak about hablum min Allah, of course. But I think you have to speak about your adab or your ethos towards the environment. So that's how I started. And when you look at environmental ethics, what does that involve? Yeah. So you do comparative. I also did comparative study between Islam and, you know, not comparing Islam and other religions. No, you learn about other framework of thinking vis-a-vis ethics, and you find that what Islam says is pretty much it can be universally accepted. Today we have Laudato Si, we have the Islamic Declaration for Climate Change. So all these things, our colleagues, especially Dr. Fazlun, you know, are trying to you know, even launch at COP27 itself. So that's how I came to really appreciate environmental ethics. Locally, we did courses, fresh courses. People never done it at universities, at the university level before that. And on radio, on in the newspapers, in local media, we spoke about it. So today I can safely say with humility that there is quite a good gathering, a good jama'ah of people interested in environmental ethics. Yeah.
Wonderful. My wife is also quite similar. It's
Oh, fantastic.
she finds like flowers and just phenomena of nature very awe-inspiring, and
Yes,
that
that's right.
and she reflects on the creation of Allah,
Yes,
and
yes,
that
that's
inspires her.
ayat kauniyah, yeah.
Yeah, and similar way to you. We talked about the Quran, and you mentioned over 1,000 verses relate to nature or something
Yeah,
about the environment.
yeah.
What is from the Quran? What kind of environmental ethics emerge?
From the Quran, yeah. What
Yeah.
kind of environmental ethics emerged? Yeah. So maybe we should just demystify a little bit, or just clarify a little bit what I mean by the word ethics, right? So in a sense, it's adab, akhlaq, yeah, akhlaq or behavior towards the environment. So what comes, what the Quran teaches about these things are plenty. Through the various ways the Quran, you know, explains what nature is. For example, very intrigued by the ayat that speak. Of course, we hear of about the human responsibility on earth, right? The fact that we are Khalifah. So if you look at second surah, ayat 30, remember when your Lord said to the angels, I'm going to place a successor or a successive human authority on earth, Khalifah, stewardship, yeah. So Allah has chosen and created human beings to preside over the earth. And you know, in other kitabs, Ahlul Kitab, the original Bible, for example, this allusion to stewardship is also a very critical one. But then again, this has to be understood, and it helps if you are scientifically literate. By that, I don't mean that people who don't do Bachelor of Science degree won't understand. No, I think it's critical to have literacy of the environment of nature, and I think this was this is the intention of the Islamic of Islam as a religion. So if you look at the golden age of Islam in Andalus, for example, right, the people who actually came up to be great scientists like Ibn Sina in terms of medicine, and they were hufaz of the Quran al-Karim. You know, they knew the content of the Quran, and subsequently when they studied nature, they could read the Quran in nature, or they can see nature, and they can see the Quran in nature, and they can understand what the Quran is saying by virtue of their experience and their, what do you call it, observation of nature. And then creation is done by God in a balanced way, the Mizan, you know, and surah
Rahman.
in the Quran, yeah, but very critically speak about this. And Surah 54, for example, ayat 49, and with verily all things we have created in proportion and measure. Yeah? But then again, look at what we done today. We level the mountains, you know. We do unnecessary land reclamation, you know. Yeah, this is the story of how we are actually destroying the earth. Is a very familiar one. Then there is the ayat about what is happening now, Surah Ar-Rum, right? Ayat 42, I think. Yeah, you know, by virtue of man's hands, there's a corruption on the land, in the sea, yeah, and Allah deliberately makes us feel the effects of that ill doing by human beings, so that we do tawbah, we come back to the right way of living. So I think this is extremely pertinent to Muslims today. And then we realize, of course, that our life is from water. And in Surah 6, ayat 99, for example, Allah says, and it is He who sends down rain from the sky, and we produce thereby the growth of all things. We produce from it greenery, from which we produce grains arranged in layers, and from the palm trees of its emerging fruits are clusters hanging low. And we produce gardens of grapevines and olives and pomegranates, similar yet varied. Look at each of its fruits carefully, and when it yields and it's ripening, indeed, in this signs for a people who believe. I mean, it's almost like a biological textbook, it's not? You know, they illustrate the detailing of how from the rain, from the water, things grow. And I have a small garden somewhere near my house, and really, you start with the earth being parched because you've cleared it of the weeds and all of that, right? And then lo and behold, with some rain, after a couple of days, you see green things coming out from the ground, sprouting from the ground. Where did all of that come from? And being in the tropics, you'll be amazed. I think you can imagine within an area of 1 square foot, for example, you can find like 5, 6, 7 species of herbs, you know, of potential trees. So I think it's amazing how people can not appreciate this. So I'm also into, you know, with other colleagues, how do you actually prime the young child to actually be cognizant of all these things. And then, of course, there are so many ayats that speak about phenomena in the sky. There's also, you know, about the movement of the planets and all of that. I think you and I, we many of us, we realized the existence of these ayats. And actually, when I was at Institute for Islamic Understanding, they have a special Islamic quote unquote radio that runs 24 hours a day, and there's a special program we did on science and Islam, whereby we spoke, I think, about no less than 100 of these ayats, yeah, its significance in terms of physics, chemistry, biology, and how it relates, how it pertains to our lives, and how it actually gives messages to us in terms of how we should conduct our life, you know. And but most critically, this what the experts call ayat kauniyah, which is making reference to phenomena in nature. That it shows the greatness of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, is it not? And I think the critical point here is that the Quran would like us to understand. I'm very careful here, who and what Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is, right? I think knowledge of who Allah is, Tawheed, is most critical. But yet people think that once you have knowledge of Allah, then life stops. No, this is where we don't understand. That in Islam, it is knowledge of Allah that actually, and being close to Allah, having a relationship with Allah, it is the very critical element of life. If you do not have that hablu min Allah, then you cannot have a proper hablu minan nas, proper relationship with human beings, and proper relationship with the environments. And we know that in Islam also there's knowledge divided by Imam Ghazali into fardu ain, fardu kifayah, right? Individually requisite knowledge, and also communally requisite knowledge. And both of this knowledge is important. They complement each other. And these ayats, you said, how does the Quran actually give rise to the idea of respecting nature and all that. So there are many these ayats. I think we cannot go through them all today, but when you do tadabbur, when you hear of a scientific discovery, and then when you look at the ayat that pertains or that is connected to this phenomena, you'll be so amazed, at how more than 1,400 years ago, the Quran already, Prophet Muhammad SAW already, told us. And this is a critical point because I think many people do not realize the miraculousness of the Quran is a very important thing to grasp. That it is the words of the Creator, not of a human being. And I think many Muslims still, they sway between being convinced and then having doubts. So for me, it's also it's a very important chapter in our reading of Islam to understand how the Quran is a miracle. The process of the Prophet receiving the wahyu, receiving the revelation. Such one example is when he is on a camel, and the camel feels that the weight on it is getting heavier and heavier, and it's lowering its body, towards the earth, and the prophet would be call it perspiring, and having a little bit of physics. We understand that this means that there is a kind of force bearing on the prophet and hence on the camel. And can you imagine that? In other words, wahyu revelation is actually a form of energy. Don't get me wrong, yeah, we are not supposed to to rationalize. I'm not rationalizing. I'm just saying, if you're witness to this phenomenon of Rasulullah SAW receiving the wahyu, then you would be impressed. You would understand that it didn't come from him, but it came from Allah SWT. And you can explain the how of it through some knowledge of science. So there's so much of this kind of explaining of phenomena in a scientific way that is critical to the Muslim, because unless we settle this issue of, yes, the Quran is the words of Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala, I don't think we can properly later on speak about living sustainably, supporting the sustainable development goals and all of that. So these are some of the basic things, and I'm sorry I cannot go through those ayats that we know that you were talking about, because there's just so many of them. There's ayats about even the mosquito, right? There's creation of the camel. How milk is produced in the body of the cow and all of that. Yeah. So I'm sorry to have to just make it simplified like that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Given that you're in Malaysia, are there
Yeah.
practical examples of Islam being used to help take better care of the environment?
Yes. I think one thing that has to be spoken out loud in the context of Malaysia is the need for the ulama and the umara. Yeah. By ulama, I mean people who are the hufaz, people who memorize the Quran, people who know all the Sharia laws and all of that. People who specialize in Islamic studies, in Quranic studies, and Hadith studies, and the umara, who are the professionals, the policymakers, the doers out there. The people, when you have landslides, for example, the umara, when you have landslides, who do you need to come to the scene? You will need all the professionals who know the geology, who know the climate, right? And all of that. But that's not happening fast enough. That's not happening, especially nowadays. And now is the monsoon season in Malaysia, and the floods have started. all we keep on talking, and I say this with the greatest of respect to everybody in Malaysia, are just mitigation efforts, right? Mitigate, and we collect foods, we collect blankets, for the people who suffer the floods and all of that. But we hardly speak about the damage. I mean, the causes of the floods. Yeah, then there's a great percentage of the disasters happening where we can speak about the cause being climate change, but then again, we are here also trying to explain how we are a factor in the causing of climate change, right? For example, when we do deforestation, which is overboard, right? Especially deforesting forests, for purposes they are not fulfilling the needs of the people, but fulfilling the needs of certain rich groups that want to do projects. They that's the azan. Can we just stop for a second? Sorry about that.
Sure.
Yeah, these are examples, practical examples of how religion can be used to help take better care of the environment. Yeah, take one example, the wakaf. Wakaf has been used as an instrument to help in terms of enhancing availability of clean water. There are some states where it's not easy to get clean water still, so people can help the creation of wakaf. We call it wakaf air. Air means water wakaf. So it can be in the form of machine, or it can be in the form of cash. So this has taken place quite a few years now, and it's progressing very well. And then there is, in other words, normally people in Malaysia think of wakaf as giving away a piece of land, right? But right now it's changing. You can even donate money for the preservation of certain areas of the virgin jungle. For example, in Borneo, there is a project where for a 1 square foot forest, original forest area, you can donate a few dollars. This goes into a bigger fund, which is used to protect the whole forest. So it's like giving your money for protecting the environment. So it's nice to see the word wakaf being expanded in meaning in that sense. And then
Sorry, do you think there's
yeah,
an issue with the wakaf in the sense that, let's say I buy a plot of land for the wakaf, right,
yeah,
and it has lots of trees in there, so and it's
yeah.
do you think there's an issue? Let's say as population increases and you need land to build housing and things like that, if you have protected land, you can't access that in the future, like 100 years down the line. Do you think that's an issue with the wakaf?
At the moment, it's not, because these are already gazetted protected areas. These are we are talking here about national parks.
Okay.
Yeah, for as long as it is possible via the legal procedures, they will not be turned into into areas to be developed, inshallah. Because there's also the issue of there's the conflict, is it not, to develop more forests for monetary gains. But it's just that the economic system that we have, it's the sorry, yeah, is the rich that will ultimately reap the so-called financial benefits, not the poor. We have this hierarchy. We say the T20. T means the top 20% being the rich, but of course after COVID, T20 has shrunken, maybe T10. Yeah? And then we have the B40, the people at the bottommost 40% of the population, which has now increased to 60, right? So this T10 used to be 2010. It will always be this class that would be doing development in terms of commercial gains. So, but I think this is a worldwide phenomenon. So
Inequality. Yeah.
inequality. And I think in 2017, we were told that just eight billionaires or trillionaires of the world own about 50% of the resources of the world. And there you are. And this gap, I was told, is increasing every day. So if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the first two, zero hunger, no poverty, I don't think that that can happen satisfactorily if you don't have goal number 18, which is ethics, which is compassion, which is empathy, and where does that value come from? People can say just from humanistic philosophy, so be it. But then people who are serious about the afterlife, people who are serious about the belief that there is a creator called Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala who are actually constantly wanting us to do justice, as in Surah Ar-Rum and all of that. I think for Muslims, the incentive will be much bigger. So wakaf, fortunately, I think it's a growing concept in the country. And people are doing wakaf for all kinds of things, like deep in the jungle where it's difficult to get accessibility to electricity, for example. People are doing wakaf for developing solar energy. And this is happening a lot as well. So you have lights at night, to lighten up the village or whatever it is, but from using solar energy. So, and then this thing called circular economy, right? It's also coming in, whereby we have venture wakaf concepts amongst the economists, amongst the bankers, and this is developing now. Because there's not enough, what we call it, specialists yet, but we are getting a lot of help from scholars and practitioners from outside of Malaysia, from other OIC countries, for example. Then the idea that we have to have a green jihad, the idea that we have to have a kind of life that is green in terms of us lowering our consumption, being very sensitive to how much we spend and to what end and all of this. So this whole idea of green living and green deen, if you like, that is also a growing awareness in Malaysia. And I think you're aware of the Islamic Declaration on Climate Change, which was put together in 2015 in Istanbul. So Brother Fazlun, of course, was one of the major architects for that. Yeah, and myself and several other colleagues, we are trying to get this imbibed into the university curricula, be it in the Islamic studies, religious studies programs, or be it in the science engineering programs. So being at the Center for Civilization Dialogue is especially significant because we would like people of the various races, of the various different religious backgrounds in Malaysia to actually celebrate the need to have environmental ethics, in an open and in an open way. Like, we don't want them to feel that they are forced to accept Islam. No. So this is why the scientific element is very critical. So if we support our arguments for the whys of what we need to do, then it's easier. That's why I said right from beginning, the whole notion of looking at nature as a second book, if you like. Yeah. For Muslims, you have the Quran as the book. But for non-Muslims, nature is also another book. And this is also important for Muslims. Like, if you read the book of nature, then you would understand the book of Allah that much better. And the book of nature is from Allah also. It's God's creation, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, correct. So there are many things happening in Malaysia, and I think our current Minister of Environment he has a background in Islamic studies, pure Islamic studies, but he also has postgraduate qualification in environmental studies. But unfortunately, because we are few days away from major election, they are not able to attend the COP 27.
I see.
But under his administration, the water wakaf started and other what do you call it, initiatives. But our concern now is how to get the policymakers and also the the people in the bureaucracy, the people who are actually on the ground, doing the mitigating efforts vis-a-vis floods and all of that, how to get them sufficiently impressed of the need to do this properly, that this is not just your worldly amanah, but this is also your akhirat amanah.
Do you think in
Amanah,
Malaysia, especially with the
yeah,
politicians, that they're all
yeah.
they're on board with dealing with climate change and the environmental issues, or do you have a lot of opposition to that?
I think on paper everybody is for it, right?
Mhm.
Especially when SDG is supposed to be supported by everybody.
Yeah.
Malaysia as a nation, out of the 100, almost 80 something countries of the world has signed, has ratified, right? So whether we like it or not, we will say theoretically we are all there, but I think that's one thing to say, but it's like everywhere else, I think, even in the West, right?
Yeah.
It's not just the politicians, it's everybody. You just talk about plastic pollution.
Mhm.
Um, and this is linked to science literacy. Do people really understand what plastic does to you, and I know how long it takes for it to disassemble
Yeah.
in the earth and all of that? And why are people still manufacturing or producing mineral water in plastic bottles? Who's in charge of all of that? And the producers will say there's a market for this, so we still keep producing it, right? And plastic contain, these are one-time use plastics, right? And the beaches, we have beautiful beaches, but the behavior of the people who keep on polluting in terms of plastics, so who's going to change that? So we have a long way to go in that sense, but maybe you're interested to know that we recently read a report that our neighboring country, Indonesia, the fishermen of a certain region have been given what they call payment by the government so that they are relieved of fishing for a while. But instead, what they do is collect the plastic waste from the ocean as much as possible.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so I think we need that kind of innovative, creative thinking. And I think regionally, we need to help each other out. I think the time when countries work on their own is over, and we do have wonderful friends within the group that worked on the Islamic Declaration and also the current document Al Mizan, as you are aware. Also, Brother Fazlun is very much inside that project. Brother Fakaruddin Mangunjaya, Dr. Fakaruddin from the University National in Jakarta. So he obtained, for example, a good grant from Templeton Foundation to reach out to all pesantrens, to all Islamic schools in Indonesia, to do environmentally, meaningful projects. So, of course, in Indonesia, there's 200 million overpopulation. Yeah. But in Malaysia, there's only about 20 something, 30 million. So when you speak about the population dynamics, there's also differences there. But I think it's okay. We also following, and this is why the networking is very critical. And I hope your podcast can help us and get to know more people. Yeah, we will introduce your podcast to our colleagues here.
Thank you. That is my intention.
Yeah. So that we do this together. And I think what you're doing through this podcast is very critical at this moment in time to reach out to the young people. And people, the older people, folks always say that the younger generation don't like to read, but it doesn't matter. If this is the media now, talking and communication in this digital fashion, so be it. Whatever it takes to reach the hearts, and we know that time seems to be flying. I mean, no, I'm trying to say time is shortening.
Yeah. We
I
don't have
did
much
some
time left.
research. Yeah, we don't have much time, and I did some research, and it's got to do with the way the planet is, you know, revolving, and then the axis is now tilting. All that phenomena is part of the whole thing. So I think there's a lot of naysayers, doomsday people out there, but I think we have to keep going. Like Surah Al-Zazilah says, you know, Surah 99, even if the good that you're doing is only an atom's weight, it will be seen, it will be shown, it will have an impact, and vice versa. So I think I will never ever feel depressed so as not to do anything. I think it's the hadith that says, even if tomorrow is Qiyamah, today you can plant a seed, do so. Yeah. And in Surah Al-Kahfi, Allah says to Rasulullah SAW, your job is just to tell. Yeah. So do not destroy yourself on account of you being saddened by people who don't understand, by people who don't accept. That's okay. But I just feel that in some parts, maybe not just here, there are Muslims who like to monopolize God, who like to monopolize Allah, who like to monopolize Islam. I think that's not right. They forget that everybody on the planet today is actually potentially the ummah of Rasulullah SAW. Yeah, when Rasulullah SAW is rahmatan lil alamin, the Quran says this, you know, it is literally so. So we have to prove that. And we are ummatan wasatan, another verse, right? We are supposed to be witness to other people, and Rasulullah be witness upon us. What do we do? So Hamza, I mean, I cannot overemphasize this because this is where my friends are upset with me because I tend to emphasize this all the time. There's no time for relaxing. We are only what we are, and we can do only a certain limit, you know. But then again, the love, the compassion that we're supposed to have. And for me, personal theology is very critical here. What do I mean by that? We have to be in constant tawbah. We have to be in constant, we have to be constantly checking our heart, right?
I think that's what the salah's there for. 5 times a day, you have to check your heart.
Precisely.
The bigger picture.
That's right. Yeah. And we have to understand what is the meaning of all that rituals. The 5 pillars of Islam and the 5 pillars of Iman, you know, believe in the unseen, all that comes to bear today, here and now. So my sadness is towards the younger generation, the sense that it is a time when there's just so much information. How are they going to, you know, what do you call it, navigate through all this?
Indeed, so, we have big challenges in our time. Climate change is one of the biggest ones, and also not just climate change, but also the spiritual crisis, which is part of the issue of climate change, which because people abandon God,
that's the root problem.
Immorality spreads across the earth, and we see that with the environment.
Right. Precisely. So it's so, for me, it's so nice to meet someone. I won't tell you how ancient I am, but I think you're you know, compared to us, another generation, if you like. It's so overwhelmingly. I feel so grateful, syukur, to be able to work in no matter how small a manner with Muslims like yourself. Yeah. So if there's anything else in whatever way, we can do something for you, just let us know. And we would want to be following you in your program here, podcast, Godly Life. I think it's good because process of learning never stops, Indeed. And you remember that that ayat that says that all this knowledge is just like a drop in the ocean, and if 7 oceans or something is
if the oceans were ink, they would not be exhausted. Yes,
that's right. They will not be exhausted. Yeah. So this idea of knowing God, and the fact that He asked us, "Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord?" and we said yes. All those things in the Quran, we need to rediscover that. And like Bin Toffler says, the illiterate of the future is not those who are cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So I think for Muslims, we need to unlearn many things, which we maybe inadvertently absorb, throughout our life. That's okay. Everybody is like that, right? But Unlearning is one thing. Unlearn. Then we need to learn all this new stuff that we are facing now, right? The dangers. And then we have to relearn what? Obviously, our faith. And there's just so much. And there's no time for unhealthy competition. There's no time for uh, suuzon, thinking badly of people. And what more thinking badly of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So this is so much to be done, and I hope you keep going, and I hope you will, cover more people, more people's views of the godly life. And I think we need to spell it out, not just for ourselves, but also for our fellow human beings who are not yet Muslims. And you living in the West, you're in London, right? You're based in London. I stayed for a while in London when I did my master's, but that was maybe 20, 30 years ago. But I'm sure it's much more complex today in the UK. Yeah. So,
okay, Dr. Azizan, I think one last question, right?
Yeah, sure.
Is what do you think Muslims can do more to actually lead the way in taking care of the environment? How can we set an example to everyone else?
Yeah, I think firstly by I just mentioned just now what Alvin Toffler says, right? Learn, unlearn, relearn, right? So I think we have to really ask ourselves, what exactly is our worldview?
Mhm.
What exactly is our stand, our understanding, our meaning and purpose of life? So for that, I really think that some kind of philosophical reflection is important. So I think what Muslims can do is the ulama umara just now I was talking about, maybe these two groups, maybe there are other groups. We need to be engaging each other like we are engaging now. And we have to make these conversations expand. I know in the cyber world, there's a great warfare going on. There's dark world, whatever world. So we have to create our space inside there, and share more examples. Like I did not touch upon some of the projects that we actually do. I mean, I work with the ulama umara, and in that privilege, syukur alhamdulillah, I'm one of those people who manage to build bridges. The Department of Islamic Development, for example, in Malaysia, quite a few groups. It's constantly attacking them, questioning them. But I work with them, and one good thing they're doing is a group of them are trying to put the Maqasid Sharia, principles of Maqasid Sharia, side by side with the Sustainable Development Goals, right? For example, if you look at the principle of preservation of life, of progeny, of akal, of property, right? And you try to look at and you look at the 17 goals. These 17 goals actually are subsumable, if not under all of the five, in some of the five principles. So what they're trying to do here, and this is an important issue also, we should stop saying things or thinking that if something is from the West, then we deny it. It's against us. So we should stop reading the world in certain ways. We should get to the basic meaning of things, meaning and purpose. So Muslims should try to understand in the system of education, being the mechanism, teach the young Muslims meaning and purpose of what is Islam. So in Radio IQ, for example, now we have Muslims from the Chinese community, from the maybe Indian community. Actually, basically new Muslims, explaining what is the meaning of the Shahada, explaining what is the meaning of Islam. It's total submission. So much of that information, I think many Muslims take it for granted. They don't go back to ground zero. They don't start with the most basic elements. They just think that being one Muslim is already sufficient. No. So Muslims today must really learn, unlearn, and relearn. So I I would simplify like that. Yeah. Mute. You're muted.
Sorry. I think those are wise
Yeah.
words to finish on, Dr. Azizan Baharuddin. Thank you for coming on. It's been a real
Thank you so
pleasure,
much.
and I've learned a lot.